William Baker's fossilizing body lies beside a bowl of rotting fruit that regrows, emitting ozone and decay beneath his unblinking stare. My fingers trace the rust streaks on the wet child's shoe sole, the dampness seeping through my gloves like a slow infection. The trail is littered with red sand from the desert storm, each grain catching the bone, white light that bleeds from the sky. I don't feel the sandstorm's grit on my skin anymore. Only the relentless, metallic grinding beneath my feet, a sound like rusted gears grinding through bedrock. It syncs with the shoe's damp rhythm, a sickening pulse in my bones. I pull the shoe closer, the fabric clinging, cold and heavy with unnatural moisture. My pocket holds only dust, no dive report form, no proof I ever left the ocean. The bureaucratic void of my mortality has been erased, replaced by this wet shoe and the trail's grinding hunger. The air tastes of copper and old blood, the scent of the national park trail after the storm. I lift the shoe, and the sandstorm's wind hisses through the trees, a distorted metallic rasp like a blade scraping bone. Then I feel it, the taxidermy cat. Stitched together from different cats, its fur matted with dried blood, its jaw unhinging with a sound like wet parchment, tearing. It breathes cold air onto my wrist, which is already turning bone white, the skin thinning like sun-bleached parchment. Its claw pricks my sleeve, pulling a single thread from my fabric. I watch the thread float in the air, a pale filament against the red sand. The shoe's dampness spreads up my fingers, a cold liquid seeping into my joints. I can't move my thumb, it's already fossilizing. The grinding beneath the trail intensifies, a deeper thumping now, like the earth itself is beating. It matches the shoe's wet rhythm, a mechanical heart beneath the sand. I try to step back, but my foot is already fused to the ground, the red sand hardening around my boot like dried blood. The taxidermy cat's stitched eyes, stitched with mismatched colors, fix on my wrist. Its breath is cold, smelling of grave dirt and salt. It leans closer, its fur rasping against the trail. I feel a sharp prick on my skin where the claw had been, and a thread from my sleeve pulls free, hanging like a lifeline in the air. The shoe's dampness spreads further, a liquid coldness seeping into my bones. I watch my wrist turn bone. White, the skin thinning, the veins turning to dust. The wet shoe is no longer just damp. It's pulling my humanity into the earth, stitch by stitch. The taxidermy cat's stitched jaw unhinges wider, breathing cold air onto my fossilizing skin. The metallic grinding becomes a scream in my ears, a high-pitched screech like nails on glass, then a sudden sharp silence. I see the thread hanging in the air, a single pale filament. It's the only thing left of me then. The needle drops. The shoe felt heavier now, a leaden weight pulling at my wrist. The park office loomed, a squat, bureaucratic monolith of faded beige and cracked concrete. The red sand clung to everything, a persistent film coating the air, the steps, the very thought of complaint. I pushed through the door, the bell above it twin thrumming, with a discordant note that resonated deep within my bones. The interior smelled of dust and despair, a familiar, unsettling blend. A single desk occupied the center of the room, behind which sat a woman whose face seemed carved from the same beige concrete as the building itself. Her eyes, magnified by thick lenses, tracked my approach with a disconcerting lack of warmth. Forms lay stacked in neat, impenetrable piles. "Complaint," I managed, the word tasting like ash. She pointed a long skeletal finger toward a row of forms, each one a different shade of bone white. "Fill one out," she said, her voice a dry rustle. I picked one up. The paper felt brittle, unnatural beneath my fingers. As I examined it, I realized it wasn't paper at all. It was fossilized, the intricate script etched into what felt like hardened bone. I ran a finger across the surface, leaving a trail of dust. The grinding beneath my feet intensified, a low mechanical growl that seemed to emanate from the floor itself. I ripped a corner from the form, a sharp, tearing sound that echoed in the oppressive silence. The act felt wrong. A cascade of metallic filings, fooling glinting, wet rust, spilled from the fracture, catching the bone, white light filtering through the grimy windows. The woman didn't react. She simply continued to observe, her magnified eyes unwavering. The grinding escalated, a rhythmic pulse mirroring the dampness spreading up my arm from the shoe. I felt a tightening in my chest, a constriction of breath. The elevator shaft groaned as the doors began to open, a protracted screech that matched the shoe's unsettling rhythm. It wasn't the sound of metal against metal, but something older, something deeper. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of decay and something else. something indefinably wrong. My fingers, already stiffening, fumbled with the buttons. The taxidermy cat appeared silently, materializing from the shadows near the elevator, its stitched eyes, mismatched hues of amber and grey, fixed on my neck. A claw, sharp and unexpected, snagged a thread from my collar, pulling it taut. I felt a prick on my skin, a cold, invasive sensation that spread quickly. The thread broke free, floating in the air like a fragile lifeline. The dampness on my arm intensified. A creeping coldness that numbed my senses, my breath hitched. My skin felt tight, stretched like sun-bleached parchment. My vision blurred, the beige walls of the office seeming to shift and warp. The grinding beneath my feet became a deafening roar, a mechanical heartbeat threatening to shatter my skull. The scent of decay intensified, suffocating. I tried to speak, to protest, but my voice caught in my throat. A shallow rasp escaped. A pathetic whimper lost in the mechanical cacophony. My lungs felt constricted, starved of air. The cat leaned closer, its fur rasping against my neck. The breath it exhaled was cold, smelling of grave dirt and salt. I looked down at my arm and saw the bone white spreading, the skin thinning, the veins disappearing beneath the surface. The shoe's dampness pulsed, a cold, relentless tide washing over my being. The woman behind the desk remained impassive, an unmoving statue in a landscape of decay. My fingers were frozen, useless. My arm felt detached, as if it belonged to someone else. The grinding reached a fever pitch, a screaming crescendo that threatened to tear me apart. The air grew thick, viscous, pressing down on me, stealing my strength. I felt myself slipping, dissolving, becoming one with the dust and decay. A single thought surfaced, a desperate, futile plea. This isn't happening. My chest tightened further, a vice squeezing the last vestiges of breath from my lungs. I could feel the rigidity spreading, the fossilization creeping upward, consuming me. The cat-stitched jaw unhinged wider, revealing a darkness within that mirrored the void within myself. Then, a single pale filament 40, the thread from my collar hung suspended in the air, a fragile reminder of what I was losing. The needle dropped. The red sand, finer than any ID encountered, infiltrated everything. It wasn't tea just on the soles of my boots, clinging like a second skin. But within the air itself, a gritty taste coating the back of my throat. Each breath felt like inhaling powdered brick. The trail, barely discernible amongst the dunes, led towards what the maps. The archaic, brittle charts salvaged from the park's forgotten archives. Ford, designated as Ruins Sector 7, submerged they, D said. A former ranger station, swallowed by the shifting sands decades ago. Then, inexplicably exposed again. Beneath my feet, the floorboards groaned, a deep-throated complaint that resonated not through the wood, but through the bone of my own legs. It wasn't a creak, but a rhythmic thud, a pulse that mirrored the dampness spreading from the shoe, now a cold, insistent weight against my wrist. The thumping wasn't consistent. It swelled and receded, like a submerged heart struggling to maintain its rhythm. It wasn't Schofinder, the floorboards I realized, but from them, as if the very structure itself was breathing or digesting. I pushed further, past a collapsed section of wall, the skeletal remains of a doorway framing a view of nothing but swirling red. A missing persons poster, bleached almost white by the relentless sun, clung to a splintered post. A young woman, a park volunteer, vanished 3 weeks prior. Her face, a faded photograph, seemed to ripple in the heat haze, the image unstable as if struggling to maintain its form. And then I saw it, or thought I did. A flicker of movement in the window of what remained of the station, a face pressed against the glass, mirroring the woman on the poster. The glass wasn't tea glass anymore, not entirely. It had the texture of dried clay, cracked and brittle. The face, when it solidified, wasn't hers. It was a doll, face porcelain smooth, with eyes painted a disturbingly vibrant bone. White. The head rotated, not with the fluidity of life, but with the jerky, segmented motion of a marionette. It swiveled, locking onto my gaze, a single, black hair, or what appeared to be hair, a filament of something slick and oily trailed from its stitched scalp. The cat, a patchwork monstrosity of mismatched fur and mismatched eyes, materialized from the shadows, its form coalescing like dust motes in the crimson light. It didn't talk, it assembled itself, each stitch a tiny, deliberate movement. It settled on the crumbling threshold, blocking my path, and the air around it seemed to cool, a localized chill that prickled my skin. I tried to raise my hand to shield my eyes, but my arm felt heavy, sluggish, as if filled with lead. I glanced down, and the discoloration had spread, the bone white creeping up my forearm, replacing flesh with a chalky, brittle surface. The veins once visible beneath my skin had vanished, swallowed by the encroaching pallor. The dampness from the shoe intensified, a frigid tide washing over my hand, numbing my senses. The doll's head tilted, its painted lips curving into a grotesque parody of a smile. A thread, fine as a spider, a silk extended from the cat, a spore, a single pale filament reaching for my collar. It found its mark, snagging on the fabric, then stitching itself through the material, drawing the collar tight against my neck. A prickling sensation, cold and invasive, spread across my skin. The thread didn't tear the fabric, it tie-became, the fabric integrating itself into the weave. The grinding beneath my feet intensified, a mechanical scream building in pitch and volume. It wasn't the sound of decaying wood or shifting sand, but something manufactured, something precisely engineered, a chorus of gears grinding against bone. The air thickened, viscous, coating my lungs with a gritty residue. My breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale a struggle against the oppressive weight. I tried to speak, to cry out, but my vocal cords felt frozen, constricted, my vision blurred, the edges of the ruin dissolving into a swirling vortex of red. The cat, as stitched eyes locked onto mine, the mismatched pupils dilating, consuming all light. I could feel the rigidity spreading, the fossilization accelerating, my muscles stiffening, my joints locking. The scent of decay intensified, mingling with a metallic tang on my tongue, a taste of rust and something ancient. I looked at my hand, the bone white now complete, the skin stretched taut, translucent, revealing the dark, hollow spaces beneath. The shoe pulsed, its dampness a relentless tide, consuming me. The doll, his head snapped forward, its stitched mouth opening, revealing not a tongue, but a darkness, a void that mirrored the emptiness within myself. The thread tightened, constricting my airway. The grinding reached a fever pitch, a mechanical heartbeat threatening to shatter my skull. The cat leaned closer, its breath cold and stale, washing over my face, and then a single, precise click, a delicate foot-snap from the cat's yaw. The needle dropped. I stared at the crumbling remnants of what had once been a park map in my hands. Now it was little more than bone dust, each grain whispering against my skin like tiny skeletons dancing on my palms. The red sandstorm hadn't just infiltrated everything. It seemed to have eaten away at this last vestige of guidance. The metallic grinding beneath me intensified as I scattered the fragments onto the floorboards. It wasn't a sound of protest, but an industrial scream building in pitch and volume like the very gears of hell turning over. Each grain of bone dust falling added another layer to its cacophony, until it felt as if my own heartbeat was being echoed back at me through the soles of my boots. I looked down at myself, half expecting to see a skeleton standing where flesh should be. But no, I was still here. William Baker, deep-sea diver turned park ranger, or so they told me once upon a time when memories weren't as slippery as this red sand. The cat materialized from the shadows again, its stitched eyes locking onto mine. It wasn't just watching now, it seemed to be waiting for something. Its paw moved with deliberate precision, extending towards my collar. I tried to jerk away, but my body felt sluggish, leaden. The air around me thickened too, viscous and oppressive like breathing underwater. A single thread fine as a spider's silk extended from the cat's paw. It snagged on my collar, then began stitching itself through the fabric with an efficiency that was almost mechanical. I could feel it pulling tight against my neck, constricting my airway. Each breath became more laborious than the last. My vision blurred at the edges, red sand swirling like a miniature storm within my field of view. The grinding beneath me reached fever pitch, resonating through every bone in my body, until all I could hear was that mechanical heartbeat, threatening to shatter my skull from inside out. The thread tightened further still, now digging into my skin with an icy precision. My neck stiffened along with it, muscles turning rigid like stone setting around a foundation. The sensation spread upwards, traveling along the same path as the dampness from the shoe on my wrist had taken earlier. Now both were creeping up towards my elbow. The doll's face appeared again in what remained of its window frame, eyes locked onto mine once more. But this time there was no mistaking it. This wasn't just a marionette anymore. It was alive, or at least animated by something far beyond the realms of natural life. Its lips parted slightly, revealing not teeth but darkness, an abyss that seemed to swallow all light. The grinding stopped abruptly, leaving behind only silence so profound I could hear every beat of my accelerating heart echoing within it like a drumroll leading up to some impending doom. And then, with one final tug from the cat's paw, there came another sound, a delicate foot-snap. It wasn't bone-breaking or fabric-tearing, no Velcro ripping this time either. Instead, it was something more precise, more calculated, like a single note played on an instrument designed for silence. The needle had dropped. The streaks weren't red. Not exactly. They were the same bone, white as the sand, but tinged with a sickly internal luminescence, like the veins of a corpse exposed to the sun. I traced one with a fingertip. The dust clinging to my skin, a fine granular residue that felt both alien and intimately familiar. The shoe on my wrist pulsed with a dampness that mirrored the moisture on the streaks, a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction. It wasn't just wet, it felt wet, a phantom sensation blooming across my forearm. The cat's breath. A screech, not a hiss, not a purr. It wasn't an exhale of air, but a grating of something mechanical against bone. It synchronized with the thumping beneath the floorboards, a steady thrum, thrum, thrum that resonated in my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. It was a heartbeat, but not mine. It was the floors, the parks, the lands, a slow geological pulse. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the streaks, but the cat's breath was a physical thing now, a frigid gust that pressed against my skin, raising gooseflesh. It smelled of something ancient, something that shouldn't be smelled in a memory of decay long before I was born. My fingers felt brittle, like dried twigs snapping under the slightest pressure. I flexed my hand, watching the dust fall away, revealing the pallor beneath. The transformation wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a visible change. The cat's stitched mouth, a grotesque parody of feline grace, yawned. It wasn't a natural opening, but a deliberate parting of the seams, revealing not a pink, fleshy interior, but a darkness, a void. And within that darkness, nestled amongst the threads and the decaying fur, was a child's shoe. The same damp, grey shoe that clung to my wrist. It pulsed with the same unsettling rhythm as the thumping beneath the floorboards. A wave of nausea rolled over me, bile rising in my throat, a metallic tang coating my tongue. I swallowed the effort, a monumental task. The air thickened, becoming viscous, clinging to my lungs like a shroud. I could feel the dust accumulating on my eyelashes, a fine layer of grit that blurred my vision. The cat's paw extended, a slow, deliberate movement. The thread, thin as a spider's silk, tightened against my neck, a cold, insistent pressure. I tried to pull away, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. It was as if I were wading through treacle, each movement a monumental effort. The dampness on the shoe on my wrist intensified, spreading up my arm, a creeping coldness that numbed my fingers. My vision swam, the red sandstorm within my eyes intensifying, swirling like a vortex. The thumping beneath the floorboards escalated, a frantic drumbeat against my skull. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, a strangled gasp lost in the mechanical pulse. The thread tightened further, a searing pain blossoming at the base of my neck. My muscles locked, rigid and unyielding. The dampness continued its relentless ascent, now reaching my elbow, a creeping paralysis that stole the feeling from my fingertips. I watched, detached, as my hand slowly curled into a claw. The doll's face reappeared in the window frame, its expression unchanging, impassive. The darkness within its mouth widened, a silent invitation into an abyss. It wasn't just observing me anymore, it was anticipating something. A completion, a culmination. I felt a strange sense of inevitability, a resignation to the inevitable. The fight had gone out of me. There was nothing left to fight for. The cat's breath became a rasping sigh, a final exhalation of something ancient and malevolent. The thumping beneath the floorboards ceased, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible tug, the thread tightened, pulling against my skin, and then the snap! A delicate, precise sound, like the breaking of a frozen twig. Not bone, not fabric. Something else, something engineered, something designed. The needle had dropped. The bulletin board groans under my grip. The metallic rasp, echoing like a bone scraping against bone. It is not just rust. It is something else, something more visceral. I dig my fingers into the cracks between the weathered notices, feeling the grit of sand and the dampness that seems to cling to everything here. The board yields with a reluctant creak, the nails pulling free like teeth from rotting gums. I peel back the layers of papers, each one bearing witness to some forgotten announcement. Park closures due to storms, lost pets found and reclaimed, missing persons notices yellowed with age. Beneath them all is the face I've seen before, the girl from the poster in my pocket. Her eyes stare out at me, accusing, pleading. The ink of her image seems to bleed into the paper around it, seeping like dried blood. The metallic grinding intensifies as I pry off the last nail, a filigree of rust falling away like dandruff from an ancient scalp. It is not just metal on metal, it is something alive, something protesting being disturbed. The cat watches me with its stitched together eyes, its breath mechanical and rhythmic, echoing the thumping beneath my feet. I reach for the missing person poster, but as soon as I touch it, the paper begins to dissolve. Not into dust or ash. No, this is something more liquid. It is like watching blood drain from a wound, except in reverse. The ink runs downwards, leaving behind only dried flakes of red that crumble at my touch. The cat's paw extends, its thread trailing behind it like an afterthought. I feel the prick against my finger before the pain registers, a sharp, sudden bite followed by a slow, creeping numbness. Bone, white fluid wells up around the puncture, not blood but something denser, heavier. It pulses with the same rhythm as the thumping underfoot. The wetness of the shoe on my wrist intensifies, spreading upwards like ink through watercolor paper. I watch in detachment as my fingers curl into a claw, stiffening and losing their flexibility one joint at a time. The transformation isn't just physical, it is sensory too. My skin feels thinner somehow, more translucent, like bone. I feel lighter yet heavier simultaneously, as if gravity itself is shifting around me. Each step towards the park office seems to take longer than the last, each stride stretching out into eternity. Time stretches and warps like taffy pulled by unseen hands. The metallic grinding follows me, a symphony of filings clattering against each other in an endless echoing chorus. It is not just coming from my hand now, it is all around me, seeping up through the earth itself. The ground beneath my feet is alive with it, vibrating like a tuning fork struck by some unseen force. The cat trots beside me, its breath keeping pace with mine despite my labored stride. Its paw reaches out occasionally, tapping against the bone-white fluid on my finger like Morse code from another world. Each tap sends a shockwave of pain up my arm, but I welcome it, anything to distract from the creeping paralysis. The office looms before me, its doorframe filled with shadows that seem to move independently of their source. They writhe and twist as if alive, beckoning me closer while simultaneously pushing me away. The metallic grinding crescendos as I reach for the handle, a discordant cacophony that feels like it might shatter my skull, and then, amidst all this chaos, silence. A needle drops into place inside my mind, and everything stills. Time holds its breath. Even the cat's mechanical breathing pauses mid-cycle. The thumping beneath the floorboards ceases abruptly, leaving behind an emptiness so profound that it feels like a physical weight pressing down on me. Then darkness claims me, swift and absolute as if someone has flipped off the lights of the world itself. I fold the poster into an origami boat, its creases sharp and precise like the lines on a map leading to some uncharted territory. It is damp in my hands, as if it has been crying tears of ink instead of blood. I hold it aloft for a moment before releasing it onto the tide pool, watching as the currents claim it. The doll's head rolls towards me from its resting place among the rocks, bobbing like an apple floating in cider. Its eyes are blank, yet they seem to accuse nonetheless. As it reaches the edge of the water, I expect a splash, but there is none. Instead, it sinks with a metallic screeching that echoes through my skull like nails on bone. The sound pierces me, driving into my ear canal like an ice pick into soft fruit. It grinds against itself in discordant harmony, each note resonating deep within the cavity of my head until everything else fades away except this symphony of metal and madness. I clap both hands over my ears but find only one compliant palm awaiting me. The other is already occupied by a familiar weight pressing down upon it. The cat's paw has stitched itself there, its thread trailing like a spiderweb strand caught in an updraft. I try to pry at it with my nail, but bone-white fluid leaks out around my finger instead of blood. The stitching seems to tighten as the doll sinks deeper into obscurity beneath the waves, pulling me along with it until we're both submerged up to our eyeballs in this red tide. My body feels heavy now, too heavier than seawater or even bone should be capable of feeling alone. Each step towards the park office becomes laborious, my feet sinking into sand that seems determined not just to bury but consume me whole. The metallic grinding follows me everywhere now, in every footstep, every breath drawn through clenched teeth against the pain radiating from my ear canal downwards along each vertebra like a spine of pure agony. My skin feels thinner too, translucent almost. I can see the bone beneath it beginning to show through at certain angles under this hellish red light filtering through clouds thick with desert sand and dust particles dancing on unseen currents. It is as if I'm turning into something else entirely, some creature made of dried blood and bone-white flesh. The office looms before me like a monolith, carved from the same material my body seems intent on becoming. Shadows writhe within its doorway, moving independently yet seemingly aware of each other, an intricate dance performed by unseen choreographers who delight in tormenting their audience with glimpses just out of reach. I reach for the handle but hesitate mid-air as something felt brush past me, a whisper too quiet to hear properly yet loud enough to make every hair on my body stand erect. It is not cold, exactly, more like an absence of warmth combined with pressure building up inside one's skull until it threatens to explode outward. Then silence falls abruptly upon the scene. A needle drops into place somewhere deep within my mind, and everything stills. Time holds its breath along with me while even the cat pauses mid-breath cycle as if waiting for some unseen cue before exhaling slowly through stitched together lips. The metallic grinding ceases suddenly too. It is not just stopped but vanished entirely, as though it was never there to begin with, leaving behind only emptiness echoing within my skull, like a vast cathedral devoid of faith or hope. Then darkness claims me swiftly, and absolutely as if someone has flipped off the lights of the world itself. The grit of the red dust coating my skin feels less like particles and more like a fine abrasive powder slowly wearing me away. It settles into the creases of my palms, under the nails, a constant reminder of the storm outside and the storm within. I find a sliver of something hard and brittle, likely a fragment of the bleached driftwood that litters this coastline, and press it against my forearm. The intent is simple to mark, to leave a record. Death inevitable. I carve, the letters shallow, uneven. The action doesn't feel like defiance, but acceptance. A dull ache blossoms beneath the skin, less from the cutting, more from the sheer weight of the words themselves the shard drags. Not cleanly, not like a blade, but with a wet rasp, a grinding sensation that echoes the sound the doll made as it slipped beneath the waves. It's a sickeningly familiar sound, of friction against something yielding something. Organic. The edges of the letters bleed. Not with blood, but with a viscous pearl, white fluid that beads on the carved lines before being absorbed by the increasingly porous surface of my skin. It's not a clean break. This writing, it's a tearing, a flaking. I work faster, the shard biting deeper. The red dust clings to the moisture, turning the carved words into a crimson gash on a canvas of bone. Each stroke sends a tremor through my arm, a vibration that resonates not in muscle, but in something deeper, in the hollow spaces within my bones. It's as if the shard isn't cutting shunmai, but cutting furumi, revealing layers of something else underneath. The cat shifts on my hand, its stitched form flexing, a subtle pressure against my palm. The stitched lips pull back, not into a snarl, but into a parody of a smile, revealing teeth that aren't teeth at all, but tiny, polished bone fragments, a prickle, sharp and precise, lances into my eye. Not a stabbing pain, but a cold, invasive pressure, as if a needle made of ice is tracing the curve of my iris. My vision fractures, a kaleidoscope of bone, white and dried blood, swirling, dissolving the edges of the park office, the red sandstorm, even my own hand. The world isn't darkening, it's thinning, becoming translucent, as if viewed through layers of parchment soaked in seawater. The wetness of the child's shoe, the one I found half buried in the sand, seems to seep into my vision, into my lungs, filling the hollows of my body with a cold, clinging dampness. The metallic grinding returns, amplified. It's no longer just in my ears, but in my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. It's the sound of two worlds grinding against each other, the sound of me being pulled apart and reassembled into something else. The shard slips from my grasp, clattering onto the sand, but the sensation of it scraping against my arm persists, a phantom touch, a lingering ache. I try to lift my other hand, to wipe the fluid from my forearm, but the movement is sluggish, hampered. My fingers feel heavy, not with weight, but with density, as if they're turning to stone. The skin feels stretched, papery, and when I flex my fingers I can see the faint outline of bone beneath the surface. It's not a gradual change, but a rapid acceleration, a geological process unfolding in real time. The bone-white fluid continues to seep from the carved words, spreading like a network of veins across my arm, solidifying, encasing. The cat's paw tightens, the stitched threads digging deeper into my flesh. It's not painful, not exactly. It's transformative. The pressure is reshaping my hand, molding it, conforming it to the contours of the taxidermied paw. The warmth is gone, replaced by a chilling stillness. The air around me feels thick, not with dust, but with a stillness that presses against my chest, stealing my breath. The office looms closer, its shadows deepening, writhing. They aren't just shadows, I realize, but shapes forming, reforming, coalescing into something vaguely humanoid. The rhythmic thumping beneath the floorboards intensifies, vibrating through the ground, through my bones, resonating with the grinding sensation in my arm. Then silence. Not the absence of sound, but a profound, absolute stillness. A needle drops somewhere deep within my mind, and everything stills. The cat pauses mid-breath, its stitched lips parted in a silent snarl. The red sandstorm hangs suspended in the air, each particle frozen in time, and the needle, the one that pricked my eye, completes its descent. The wet shoe grips in my hand like a pulsating organ, its dampness seeping into my palm, cold and insistent. I approach the doll, its porcelain face tilted towards me, eyes fixed on some point beyond reality. Its hands are outstretched, fingers splayed open as if awaiting something long overdue. The cat shifts behind me, a rustle of fabric against bone, its breath whispering across my neck like an icy exhalation. I can feel it watching, waiting for the final thread to be pulled. The metallic grinding that has become my constant companion amplifies, resonating in my teeth, vibrating through my skull. I place the shoe into the doll's hand. A sensation akin to pressing flesh against stone. It fits perfectly, its wetness melding with the bone-white fluid coating the doll's fingers. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the cat exhales, a sound like the sigh of ancient timbers, and the last thread connecting its jaws unravels. The doll's hand closes around the shoe, gripping it tightly as if afraid to let go. The rhythm that has been throbbing beneath us, the heartbeat I've felt in my bones since this began, intensifies, filling every hollow space within me with its pulse. It is not just a sound now, it is a sensation, a physical force pushing against the inside of my skin. The cat inhales sharply behind me, drawing all attention to itself. Its breath matches the rhythm perfectly, as if they've been synchronized by some unseen conductor. The air grows thick around us, pressing down on my chest like an invisible weight. It is not just heavy with dust anymore. It is alive, sentient. I turn towards the cat slowly, feeling every creak of my bones echoing through this unnatural stillness. Its eyes are fixed on me, but they're not seeing me. Not as I was. They reflect something else now, the same bone-white fluid that coats its stitched form and drips from the doll's hands. The fluid begins to spread across the cat's body like liquid fire, burning through stitches, consuming fabric. It stretches out towards me too, seeping into my skin with a cold, invasive touch. I can feel it in my arm first, the one that bears the carved words of inevitability, then spreading upwards along my spine, encasing my ribs. I'm no longer just watching this transformation. I'm feeling it. The fluid is not just bone-white anymore. It is alive with tiny fragments of something else swimming within it. 1,000 miniature dolls and cats, writhing in their liquid prison. My vision flickers like the dying light of a candle flame. For an instant, everything goes dark before exploding into white noise bone. White fluid swirling around me, devouring all color, drowning out every sound but that rhythmic thumping beneath us. And then silence, the absolute kind where even your own heartbeat seems muffled and distant. The needle drops somewhere deep within my mind, piercing through layers of consciousness, until it reaches something primal, something ancient buried beneath centuries of evolution. Everything stills, even the red sandstorm hangs suspended in midair as if caught by an unseen photographer. Then comes the sensation of falling, a descent into nothingness that starts from every point on my body simultaneously. It is not physical, there are no limbs to lose balance with, no ground to fall onto. But it is a profound sense of loss nonetheless, of self, of time, of reality itself, as I tumble endlessly towards some dark horizon where all threads converge into one and dissolve. The needle completes its descent, just as the world around me begins to fade away. The last thread severed, leaving nothing but emptiness behind. The bone-white fluid spreads through my collar, seeping into the fabric like liquid fire, burning through the threads of my identity. It flows over the carved words on my arm, inevitably, now indistinct beneath the spreading tide. The taxidermy cat shifts behind me, its stitched form creaking with each movement, a sound like dry bones grinding in a drawer. Its breath hitches, a metallic rasp that sharpens into a high-pitched whine, then fades as its jaws unhinge completely, opening wider than any living thing should. The last thread, the one woven into my collar, glints dully under the bone-white light. I feel it pull. Not a tug, but a deep, resonant, unravelling that starts at my throat and spirals outward. The thread is cold, slick with the same bone, white fluid, and as the cat's jaws close around it, I feel my own collar tighten, not with pressure, but with the sensation of something vital being pulled from my core. It's not pain, it's absence. The thread's removal leaves a hollow space where my will used to reside, a silence louder than any scream. The cat's head tilts, its eyes reflecting the bone, white fluid now pooling around its feet, spreading across the floor like spilled milk. I watch my own hand, fossilized, motionless, bone white lifts slightly, not by my command, but by the fluid's pull. The movement is slow, deliberate, like a clockwork toy winding down. My vision flickers, the bone-white light bleeding into streaks of dried blood red, then dissolving into static. I can feel the fluid rising within me, not invading but trifling, filling the spaces where my skin, my thoughts, my very self once existed. The cat's breath is a wet, rhythmic sound now, matching the pulse beneath the floorboards. Her thump, thump, thump. It's no longer just a sound. It's the rhythm of my dissolution, hammering against the inside of my fossilized skull. My fingers fossilized, motionless, curled slightly, not in resistance but in surrender to the tide. I feel my consciousness thinning, like old parchment left in the sun, the edges curling into nothing. The red sandstorm from the desert hangs suspended in the air, frozen mid-gust, a single grain of sand caught in time. The cat's jaws tighten around the thread, and for a moment the fluid in its eyes seems to shy recognize me. No, not me, but the last scrap of what I was. Then it swallows, not with a gulp, but with a soft wet fousha, like a zipper closing over a wound. The thread severs. The sound is final, a single note that hangs in the air sharp and clean. The rhythm beneath the floorboard stutters, then stops. The bone-white fluid in my eyes, in my skin, in the air itself seems to slow together. The red sandstorm remains, perfectly still. The only movement is the slow, deliberate descent of the needle, its point catching the bone-white light as it falls, not into silence, but into the space where silence was. The needle drops.